Hello and welcome to Ticker Talks, and together with Polaron Language Services, we're looking to use language to connect communities. And while Polaron is the sponsor of our program, all views and opinions in the following program are, of course, our own. Now, I would also like to acknowledge that this segment is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people and pay my respects to elders, both past, present and future as well. And I am joined by Director of Polaron Language Services, Eva Hussein. Eva, great to see you.
Thank you, Holly.
What's happening at Polaron this week?
So just last Monday, we celebrated the UN International Day of Indigenous People. So we wanted to showcase a project that we've worked on last year, actually, which was for the Aged Care and Quality Safety Commission. We did 3 different Indigenous languages for that. We don't do a lot of Indigenous languages, but that's why we thought today would be a great opportunity to talk about it, because there is a bit of an effort to revive them, to make them alive, to make them sing in the community.
Oh, incredible stuff. Now, before we move on, I also wanted to talk about the miscommunication of the week. What have we seen out there?
Holly, have you been watching the Olympics at all?
I have.
You have?
Yes.
Whenever it comes to Olympics, there are interpreters and translators that assist with communication. So Japan, before the pandemic, worked very hard at trying to develop software that would replace interpreters and translators. And I think when the pandemic hit, what's actually happened is that those projects were put on the back burner. And I guess people have realised that humans are not replaceable, not as yet anyway. And on the screen there in a moment, you'll see a couple of mistranslations where we don't know what happened, and perhaps automated translations were used. But there was a few funny signs, and Japan and China are quite famous for that. But on the main stadium, you can see on the screen there that there was a few boo-boos that they've made.
Oh goodness, it's dangerous times, isn't it? So we can't be replaced completely just yet.
No, not for a long time, if ever.
Okay, let's get right into it. Now, this week we're discussing endangered languages. Now, endangered is a word that we usually associate with animal species often, but some languages as well are dying breeds. Now, of the estimated 200 to 700 Indigenous languages that once existed in Australia, only a handful are still spoken, and even less are actually considered healthy. This means that they are still being learnt by children nowadays. Now, it is estimated that if language decline continues as it has been, half of the world's languages could be wiped off the map by the end of this century. Scary stuff. So how can we stop this from happening? Well, let's bring in our guest for today. And Gilad Zuckerman is the Chair of Linguistics and Endangered Languages at the University of Adelaide. Now, he focuses on the revival and empowerment of Aboriginal languages and cultures, and much of his work has been focused on reviving the formerly sleeping language, Bangla. Hello to you, Gilad. Great to have your company.
Hello, Holly. It's wonderful to be here.
Now, I'm going to bring in our second guest now. Now, Knut Alowski has been the CEO and Senior Linguist at the Miramar Dawang Wulabgaring Language and Cultural Centre since 2005. Now, he works with the Mirong people to preserve and revitalise their traditional language and culture. David Nuri is the Director and the Language and Culture Centre and Senior Elder. He has played a crucial role in establishing the work of Miramar Council since the 1990s. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello there.
Okay, now welcome to you all. Now, if I can start with you, Gilad. Now, in 1788, over 250 Australian languages were spoken in Australia, but now 90% of those languages are considered endangered. What is an endangered language, apart from the obvious, but how does this actually happen as well?
An endangered language is a language that is spoken by fewer than 100% of the children within the tribe. In Australia, I would argue that out of 400 languages, only 12 are not endangered or are not sleeping beauties. So 12 out of 400, it's 3%. So what happened to the other languages, so 97% of Aboriginal languages? Either they fell asleep, they became sleeping beauties, nobody speaks them natively, or they are about to fall asleep. Why does it happen? Well, it happened for two main reasons. The first one is linguicide, language killing. You have a person like Anthony Forster, who says in 1843, he was a colonist in South Australia, he says, the native would be sooner civilized if their language was extinct. This is an ideology of linguicide, of language killing. And then from 1900 to 1971, you have the phenomenon of stolen generations. And of course, when you take a child from his or her mother, what it means is that the language is gone. So this is linguicide, language killing.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for explaining that very simply for us. Now, David, over to you. Indigenous Australians have the longest continuous culture in the entire world. How does language connect to culture, and what is lost from the cultural landscape if a language does become extinct?
Yeah, language is very much attached to landscape, country. Everything in it has a language. Every living thing, I suppose, and flora and fauna, and the landscape itself, and their story attached to the land itself, where you can only understand these activities by just with the language itself. And I guess a lot of the stuff that were handed down by other people, it's a language that are strongly embedded in the country itself.
Yeah.
So if sorry.
Indeed. Sorry, you go on.
Yeah, but it's pretty much involved, they are attached. You cannot separate language and land or, other things around it, because it's embedded in the landscape itself, the language, and with its people. And, when people do not speak those language anymore, it'll be hard to really identify anything. And I think language, to a strong extent, is our identity, really. It's Aboriginal people identity. The language itself. It defines who we are, where we're from, what area we come from, what part of the region we come from. It's the language itself that clearly identifies who we are on this country. And if the language isn't around, then it's pretty much something that we probably could be lost without that language.
Yeah, I really like the point you made there about language being the identity, right?
It is very much our identity, language. I couldn't. Personally, I couldn't classify myself as anybody else other than a Mirror person, because I come from a language which is part of this country, around the Kununurra area. I do not come from anywhere else. I don't belong in other parts of the area. I belong to a certain area here in this region here. And it's, we have a totem there that are embedded on the landscape, and that's where we're pretty much from.
Yeah, indeed. Canute, what can actually be done to preserve an endangered language now?
Revitalizing or restoring an endangered language is quite a massive effort, and you can imagine that it's easy to destroy a tower and it'll take a lot longer to rebuild it. For that reason, a number of different strategies need to be used. And one of the Australian models of addressing endangered languages is the Language Centre model. So David and I work at the Miramar Language Centre, and we employ a number of approaches and strategies to revitalize the Mirong language. And this is manifold. Obviously, we need to motivate and mobilize the entire Mirong community, because this is a community effort, and it's important that everybody works together. The language center was initiated by the Mirong people, and we have developed a number of strategies that tries to bring the language back and make sure we get young and old people together and young people are taught. For example, we have what we call the Language Nest program, which is an early childhood language teaching program. And at this stage, we are teaching about 400 children every week. We take that into early learning centers, into the schools, and this is a growing program which we hope will at one stage reach 1,000 kids, which is basically the entire children's population of Kununurra. And there are other strategies, of course, where we produce bilingual radio programs, we develop resources, and we try to bring language out into the public and make the general population aware that Mirong is the language of this land. Very similar to someone moving to Italy and having to learn Italian. We want non-Indigenous people who move to Mirong country to be aware that this is the traditional language of the land.
Yeah, indeed. And Canute, just continuing on that subject, why do you think it's so important that we teach Indigenous languages to younger generations?
Well, first of all, this is the future. The young people are the future of the Mirong people. And if they grow up without their language, they will lose such an important part of their identity that they will be lost, as David said very rightly. And secondly, of course, young people are much better language learners. It's really hard to teach an old donkey new tricks. And children are better language learners because their brain is still tuned into learning the language, whereas adults will find it much more difficult to learn a language as their second language. So we want to make sure that there is some level of bilingualism achieved in the long run. At the moment, we might not be able to teach on the level we would like to, but this is definitely something we're working towards.
Yeah, remarkable work. Now, Gilad, over to you before we do have to wrap things up, but why is it so important to revive Indigenous languages that have been laying dormant?
I would argue that there are three main reasons. The first one is a moral reason or an ethical reason, and this is simply because these languages deserve to be reclaimed simply because they were treated or maltreated through linguicide. So I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm a language revivalist purely for the moral reason. But then there are two other reasons. Another reason is aesthetic reason. Just as you love having a diversity of animals, it's beautiful also to have a diversity of languages and a diversity of words that you would have never thought about otherwise. For example, in Persian, there is a word nakhur, which is a camel that will not give milk until her nostrils have been tickled. I would have never thought about it otherwise, And then there is the third reason, and that's probably the most important one when you talk to governmental officials, and this is the utilitarian benefit, the fact that language reclamation results in empowered mental health. This is under health. The humanities are in decline, but health, of course, is something that you cannot do without. Now, I believe that language revival should be categorized, should be cataloged under health, because people who reclaim their heritage tongue show signs of empowerment, signs of improved well-being, signs that they're going to be happier about themselves and about each other. Language reclamation, in my view, eventually results in fewer cases of diabetes even. And you would say, how so? Because you might say it's a sugar level. Yes, But when you revive your language, you actually reconnect with your intellectual sovereignty, with your spirituality, with your cultural autonomy. You reconnect with your soul, resulting in feeling happier, in eating better, in being less depressed, etc., etc. And of course, by a domino effect, you suffer less from diabetes.
Oh, it's so incredible, isn't it? Gilad, Knut and David, I would like to thank you all so much for coming on to the show to speak about this important topic. Thank you all so much. Now, Eva, would you like to summarise just in a couple of sentences for us basically what we've chatted about today and what was important to you today?
What a privilege, Holly, to have such learned and passionate people about language. When I first came to Australia, I was surprised that Indigenous languages aren't taught at school and they're not being promoted. So I'm just so very pleased that these efforts are being made, and I'll be applauding from the sidelines. And I felt really connected and privileged to hear Knut, David and Gilad to speak about it today.
Yeah, me too. I feel very privileged to hear about this. Now, thanks so much, Eva. If you guys have any questions about how to reach your multicultural audiences, get in touch with the team at Polaron. They're all over this space. Now, the contact details are on the screen at the moment. Thank you so much.